You know, he was running the business out of the basement. You know, his mom ran the insurance business there, and she co-owned a building there on South Public Road that was also owned by Dr. Armstrong. And he was an optometrist, and so he had his half of the building, and then his mom had the other half of the building upstairs. And Scott had a little office set up downstairs with some freezers and a desk and some miscellaneous things. But Scott had access to the whole building, and Scott had found Dr. Armstrong's business checks and personal checks in one of the closets, and that's what he did is basically he made the checks out to his business, Rocky Mountain All Natural Beef, made it look like Dr. Armstrong was basically purchasing beef from him. Scott then set up other bank accounts at different banks and then started moving the money to the different accounts.
To this initial report of a trailer being stolen by Kimball.
Correct.
Kimball reporting that.
Yeah, he reported it was stolen, and then when we started looking for him, I was going to his different residences that he had formerly been at. I found some mail for a residence in Adams County, and so I went out to that residence where he had lived, and that's when I had found that the trailer was actually hidden on the property out there.
At what point, Detective, do you start getting an inkling that there's more to this story than just check fraud and the insurance fraud?
Well, from the very beginning, this is probably around the 16th, maybe the 18th, between the 16th and 18th of January, when I'm looking for Scott. I'm told by the officers that they go by his residence and to see if he's there, and they talk to Lori McLeod. This was on Flag Drive actually at the time, so that's here in Lafayette. They go over there, she says no, he's gone, she thinks that he took off. And so I bring her in for an interview, and it's when I start talking to Lori that she brings up the fact that she thinks that he may have gone to California. He says that, you know, he's hiding in Alaska, and she brings up the fact that her daughter's missing and has been missing, and she's suspicious of Scott. We learn about Terry Kimball, you know, through the family. You know, the family tells us they hadn't seen Terry in a long time, and that according to Scott, you know, Terry up and leaves out of town. He won the Ohio State Lottery and moved to Mexico with his girlfriend named Ginger, who was a stripper. So it was one of those stories. It was kind of, you know, if you knew, if once we learned about who Uncle Terry was, it was kind of an unlikely story. And it didn't take long to figure out that it was a bogus story. You know, Ohio State Lottery didn't have any winnings for him, and we just started following up on leads, and there was just an awful lot of suspicion with Scott. You know, we've got Scott creating fake documents again, doing his usual stuff, getting a power of attorney for Uncle Terry's belongings, and sells all of Terry's personal items. During that first part of '06, it was you know, I had my check fraud, forgery, and the insurance fraud. But now I'm starting to get all these fingers that are taking me different jurisdictions, different areas, into different investigations where we don't know who has jurisdiction. And so, you know, basically at that point what we were doing is we were presenting this case to other agencies and, you know, basically soliciting help. You know, what can we do here? Basically trying to create a task force to figure out how we're going to uncover this Scott Kimball dilemma.
You're probably the first one then from law enforcement to learn about Kaysi's connection to Kimball.
I think that I was the first one that saw the bigger picture that learned about Kaysi. Okay. You know, there was a lot of other circumstances surrounding Kaysi as well that led the family and other law enforcement to believe that maybe she wasn't missing, she just didn't want to be found, right. Type of deal. But once we started looking at this and Scott's nature and everything that was going on, all this smoke surrounding him, so to speak, you know, certainly a lot more suspicious of it. And, you know, so we got Kaysi entered into CCIC and NCIC as a missing person right away. So I did, I don't know, it was probably about a 2.5, 3 hour interview with him. And during that time, yeah, he was very persuasive. At that time, I didn't know very much about him. I knew, mostly about the check fraud, forgery stuff. And I knew going into the interview that he's manipulative, and I knew that he was, described very often as a sociopath. And so knowing my case as well as I did at that point, I mean, he was pretty good at trying to poke holes in my investigation. And it was one of those things where I just let him talk. He likes to talk a lot, and I just let him talk. And then after the interview, it was go back to work and, poke holes in what it was that he had told me.
Did you ever have, when he was speaking to you, did you ever begin to develop doubts about some of the things you'd heard about him or your own case at large?
No, never doubted whether or not he was responsible. I didn't doubt who it was that I was dealing with. I just knew that I was going to have my work cut out for me. I knew that, it wasn't going to be, wasn't dealing with somebody who was just going to, confess to doing something.
How was he able to sort of ingratiate himself with other people and with these women in particular?
Scott knew what people wanted to hear from him. It didn't matter if you were a bank teller or teller or a police officer. Everybody I talked to said that he was polite, he had great mannerisms, he was the nicest gentleman, and I think that he just had the gift of gab. I mean, he was a great talker, and he used that to his advantage to manipulate people.
Describe a little bit, once you had these remains in hand and cell phone records that showed what they showed about his presence up in that area.
Correct.
At that time, what were you able to do with that?
It certainly gave us a whole lot more teeth. It gave us teeth to solicit cooperation from Scott Kimball. I think that at that point, once we were able to indicate to them that, we have a whole lot more, I think that they were in a position where they needed to cooperate with us. We didn't have a case that we could file or that Jackson County could file at that point, but in essence, it was, what we always determined is we needed to have an anvil that we could hold over Scott's head, make him feel cornered. And I think that that's when he was starting to truly feel like, his days were done and that he had been caught, and that, he was going to have to probably start being more cooperative.
From your interviews and talking to people that know Scott, what's your feeling about why he did what he did with these 4 victims?
Yeah, I think that in my knowledge of Scott and trying to figure him out, and certainly I'm not a criminal profiler, but if you look at his sociopathic behavior, I think that a sociopath has the people that are inside their circle, and there's the people that are outside their circle. And when you're inside that circle, you're simply an object to them, and there's no emotional connection, but they're using you for some reason. So whether it be financial, sexual, or whatever it might be, you have a use in their immediate life, and they need you for something. And I think that all these victims, when he no longer needed them inside his circle, then he's done with them. And I think rather than be exposed by them, it's easier to kill them. And I think that that's easy for him to do because there's the lack of conscience, there's the lack of emotional connection with anybody other than himself. I think that, in Scott's world, it's just himself that exists, and I think he sees everybody else as just people that he can manipulate, puppets, so to speak.